Merhaba, hoş geldiniz. Bu akşam Clever Franke konuşması var. Konuşma İngilizce olacak. Sorularınızı Türkçe ve İngilizce yazabilirsiniz. Ben de şimdi gerisine İngilizce devam edeceğim. Hello, thank you for joining us in the third talk of the series, New Approaches to Data. I'm together here with Clever Franke and Lalina Kalan from Digilog. New Approaches to Data is initiated by Digilog in the context of the long-term project of digitizing Istanbul Encyclopedia and its archive. This encyclopedia by Reşat Ekrem Koçu offers a wealth of information on the city. But contrary to the order and linearity suggested by the title, it's in fact a peculiar resource, and it weaves many, many narratives on people, places, habits, traditions, and incidents from Istanbul. Its complexity is further strengthened by its incomplete status. Published between 1940s and 1970s, it runs only up to the letter G. So when Kadir Has University acquired the archive of the publication in 2018 and SALT joined in the process of digitizing and cataloging, it enabled us to confirm that the encyclopedia was far from complete when the author died. But the valuable collection of documents offer insight into its making and the author as well. So as this work is in progress with the final goal of building a website of all related content put together, Digilog joined us and organized workshops ending in these public moments of lectures to help us think through the engineering and visualization of such complicated data. So now I will ask Ladin to introduce to you our guests. And I hope you enjoy the talk.
Hello again. Hello, Clever Franke here. We are with them together again. Just to give you a bit of information on Digilog and how we kind of ended up in this process is as a transdisciplinary platform that operates in the fields of technology and creative industries. We are generally very interested in projects that pertain to the preservation of cultural heritage. And SALT is one of the only leading institution dedicated to this archival process and kind of all the knowledge and information that has come out of Istanbul and its history. We've been trying to contribute to the process of exploring approaches to some of SALT's archiving projects via inviting a global community of experts in the field of information design, machine learning, and new digital tools to assist in determining possible new paths or visions. And we have been deploying this program under the title of New Data Narratives, because as we're in an age that is exploring constantly what data can do for us, I feel like creating new meanings from these tools are essential in getting to know better what these advancements can do for us, basically. And Clever Franke, here we're with Wouter and Martin, is a design company that uses data to create interactive products and experiences, inventing new solutions that exceed boundaries and drive change. They use their knowledge of design and the power of data to create powerful tools to solve complexity. And they have hosted a wonderful workshop for us in the SALT community to determine how different people can engage with the Reşat Ekrem Koçu archive and what knowledge they might be interested in knowing and how to access those areas of information in order to better the user interface design and clarify its message. So it has been one of the most helpful, I think, points of entry in terms of what the archive should and can do for its users. And without further ado, I'll ask Clever Franke to introduce themselves a bit more in depth, and we're very excited to see their presentation. Thank you for being with us again.
Yeah, thanks for this introduction, and welcome all of you. We cannot see you, but we're sure you're there, and we hope to have some interaction, perhaps by the chat, or otherwise you can also always reach out to us online. We would like to thank, first of all, SALT as well and Digilog for inviting us to be part of this series on new approaches to data, the program. Short introduction, I'm Martijn, I'm an experience designer at Clever Franke, and here with me is Wouter, he's our design director. And at Clever Franke, Today we will talk a little bit about what we do at CLEVER FRANKE and how we approach data visualization and how we use it as a way to connect people to data and technology. And our goal is in the next hour somehow to share our experiences in that, give you some inspiration hopefully, and also share with you the methods that we use to make a data visualization. And we hope that will help you as well to bring this forward and to give some inspiration in that. So first of all, it might be interesting to just see where data visualization comes from, and it's not something totally new. Like to the ages, people have explored data and tried visualizing it. In the beginning, it was really more about visualizing how trajectories are, how objects move over time. So we see first examples already how you can visualize data and with that get a better understanding of what's happening around in the world. Early examples show timelines, so you can see how certain events overlap and giving insights. That is difficult in another way to see. So the data is there and everybody knows it, but by visualizing it, it brings you a different perspective. And I think you see here early examples on how the visualization just helps doing that. And one of the major stepping stones is in William Playfair, who started playing around not only with time, but also trying to visualize quantities in this way. So this is about the exports and imports of Scotland, and it's the first appearance of a bar graph. So you can visualize it. And again, it's something that's out there, that's visible in the world, but with data, but by visualizing, you get a better understanding, or you can see things in a different way, and that's gets more evolved over the times. So another example, this one is from Playfair, is where you can see the first line graph, but with it also a first exploration on to convey a meaning in the graph. So it's not merely about plotting two different data points like the export or the imports, but you already get an understanding like what the meaning of it is or how it tries to tell a story, what's happening with this data. So in this case, you can clearly say when it's from the perspective of England. So that's why you see the colors. So it's a balance against. So when there are more imports than exports, then it's perceived as negative, or it's a balance against England, and other ones is a balance in favor. So you already see that there's a mixture of the data that's there and also about the message that's being told. Also in the way people visualize, you see developments. So this is like the first examples of a pie chart happening. And perhaps one of the most popular or famous examples is the cholera map by John Snow. He was a doctor in London, and this was centered about what he did. He visualized all the victims from a cholera outbreak in London. He plotted that on the map. So the map was, of course, a really reoccurring way to visualize geographic. And then he combined it with the data to show where the victims are of a particular cholera outbreak lived. And by it, it's not only a visualization, but it also shows that it was necessary for him to convey his message. So in those days, people thought that cholera was spread by bad air. So it was transmittable in that way. And he was convinced that it was not the case. He thought it was a waterborne disease. And with this map, he could argue that. So he could really visualize it. So there were a lot of opinions in the world around that time. And by this map, by plotting, he could show that related to a certain pump, in this case on Broad Street. You see it kind of in the center of this image. You see that all the people in the that were living near the pump got sick. So that gave him a first direction that it was related to a specific pump. And then the second thing you can see in this visual already is that it was not only related because of the location where it was, but also people using that particular pump. Because what you can see in two different places on this visual. In the brewery, they were luckily enough to not have to use the pump, actually, because back in those times, people could, during work times, enjoy a drink. So they drank beer instead of water from the pump. And you see there is no victims of cholera at that place. So with this map, it was not only about making visible what was otherwise hidden, it was also a really powerful tool to convince other people. So you had a really clear objective with it. So this is one of the first examples where you really see that the data visualization changed the perspective of many people and changed the scientific progress. So that was in the history of data visualization a really important step. And further, you see that people explore the way they visualize as well. So this a graph that not only shows it's a mixture of a line graph and a geographical mapping. It shows the Napoleon's march of his army, and in the light beige tint, it shows the people marching to Moscow, and in the black, it shows the marching from Moscow. And you see the width shows how large the army is. So you see how many people died along that march, and you see plotted in a geographical way also where it happened. So there's a lot of story in one single visual. So it's way more complex than the examples before, where you have just a data plot or you have a map of London plotted with the elements. Here at first instance, it's also more complex to grasp, but there's a high information density in this simple image. And I always like the example of Florence Nightingale as well, who was a nurse, and she also had a good understanding of hygiene and how hospitals work and how people die. But back in the days, it was really the image of people was when you go to a war, you die on the battlefield. And what she tried to convey with a really strong visual is that it's not the battlefield, but it's actually the infections that kill people. And she visualized it in a really powerful way, where you have a wheel where you see for each month the different reasons for people to have died, and with it you create a really strong visual that immediately tells that story. And I think that's again a way where you it's the data, it's already there, but it's always already has a meaning, or it has a clear goal by the person designing it. And I think that's really important element to take into account whenever you think about data, or whether you think about the way you visualize, that it has an objective or it has a meaning. And an image can tell so much more, and there are different elements to which the complexity can rise to help you tell that story. And this is another example of how dense the information can get. So these are examples of this is not an image that you grasp from the start, that you're like, okay, I totally get it. But once you dive into the details, it tells the entire story in one image. So I think this is again a direction that was taken to explore and to really figure out, like, okay, how much information can we get into one visual, and see relationships that otherwise are lost. So while this might be a really complex image, when you try to write a caption for it, or to write all the relationships that you can find in this figure, when you write it out, I think that would be even more complex. Then you would be thinking about the entire novel that you're writing. So I think that's really fascinating by visualizing it, that actually how information dense one image can be. And then you can visualize everything. So these are visualizations about visualizations. So you can visualize everything. I think that's the main message here, and people do. people visualize everything, but then it's a matter about what you do. And that brings a little bit to the definition what a data visualization is. And to us, it's a representation and presentation of data that is visual. So it has a visual element, but it's also just as important that it has the ability to amplify our cognition or our understanding of something. It's not just an image, it's not just the data, it's the combination of all those different elements. And in a way, it's a way to communicate. And then the same rules for any communication are here. So we have a sender, we have a message, and we have a receiver, and it's just the way we encode and decode this information. And at any time for us in the projects we do, while data is an important element, it's not the start, and it always resolves around the question, goals, and dreams and wishes of the people interacting with the data. So while we might end up with a graph, we don't start with it. And in our practice, that's also actually what we do a lot. So a lot of our projects are exploration, research about what's the goal of this data set, what can you do with it, what are possible questions people have, what are possible motives people have to interact with it. So also with the archive, I think during the workshop we talked a lot about this, not only about the materials that are there, but also about the goals or the aspirations of the different users. And without this, you kind of get lost, or anything goes. So with that, we make it a really central element in any project we do to map this well and to investigate it. And it can be just as inspiring as the data itself. And it's really about this intersection between these three areas that we find our design space. And that's not easy, or that's not a given, or that's not like, okay, we have these three areas and it's really easy to spot where it is, because it's noisy, it's complex, it's a lot. So you have to explore and think around a lot. Like these are plots that we create just to explore it, to see what's this data about and what can we do with it. So and to make this really complex data, scattered data, or what to do with it a little bit more focused, or at least give an angle of what are we looking for in these graphs, or what are we looking for, what kind of patterns would we be interesting, is that we focus a lot about the motivation and the key message behind the project. And that also can be a lot. So it seems like a theme I'm addressing here, but also you can have a lot of purposes why you make this visualization. And here I hope to create some clarity in the next part, because while there is a lot of uncertainties, we can also use a mapping that gives us a little bit structure how to think about it. And the first thing is, what kind of experience are we aiming for? And broadly, you have like two directions to go. One is really the explanatory part of it. So you really have a story to tell and you use the data to do it. So it's really about the designer or the researcher having found the story and try to communicate it in the most engaging, involving way. And the other one is exploratory. So you really take the approach of this data set that can be allowed by other people to browse, analyze, research. So it's about that. And with all these directions, I will show you some examples. So an example of a more exploratory one is this great project about the Codex Atlanticus, where they used Da Vinci's works by machine learning. They analyzed every page in his work and try to analyze what the theme on the page is. So is it about tools? Is it about the drawings? Is it about physics? Is it about any topic? I think they have a couple of those topics surfaced. And then they created an interface to let people explore that. by themselves. So there's no story in between. And perhaps you're interested in what kind of architecture that Da Vinci was into, and then you, by this tool, can explore it in your own way. So it's really leaving the data there and make an exploratory experience out of it. And to the other side, you have the explanatory, and that's fusing that with a story that you created yourself, or that you crafted, or that you want to tell with this data. So there's often what you see with more storytelling pages. So you have a page where there's a lot of context, you can explain a lot, and you use visuals to communicate that, or how data, or normally it's like a combination, of course, like you start with the data and then you come up with a story, but you don't let the user explore it themselves or try to find the narrative themselves. You really guide them into it. So it can be really rich and learning experiences by that. So this is when we talk about experience, like which direction to go. And probably this will already give you some direction where to go. Another thing to consider is what kind of tone would you like to have in your data visualization. So is it really about a visualization where you want to see all the values with precision, dive into it, get to the nitty-gritty details, and have the original data there? Or is it more about zooming out, sensing proportions, getting a better feeling of what this is about? And I think from this last one, immediately to show, I was hoping to have some animation with it. I think that's hidden here. Is a project you see here. So it's about particles that are in the air, and they try to visualize each particle and then animate it in a way. So no way you can see how many are up there at this point, but you get immediately a sense of the quantity of it. Tells you something, and then you can visualize it in different ways. So when you talk about, okay, all these particles in the air, they have like an impact on our lungs. So you can visualize it in a way. So it's the real data out there, but it's just communicated in a way that addresses your matter in a really emotional, almost way. And the other extreme you could take there is just plotting each point, like for example, the green canopy in Amsterdam. So you will see each tree, and we plot each tree on a map, and you can get the data of each tree out there. So this is really about the exact values and what you can see over there. So basically, those are the two extremes you can play around with as well. And well, that would be too easy when we just put two axes and we say like, okay, there are like 4 examples. This is where you can go. So we use the framework by Andy Kirkland, and that's having a little bit more detail to it, to what direction you could take. But still, basically, it is the y-axis, which says whether we're feeling or reading data, and to the left, whether we already present the insight, or to the right, where we let the viewer discover insights. And again, yeah, when you plot these different examples, you can put them in place on your canvas, and each has its own objectives. So there's no right or wrong. It's just a matter of what's your goal with this visualization that you have. And with that, I can show you some more examples and show where they fit on the canvas, just to give some inspiration of how rich the data visualization field actually is, what you can think about. So again, these are the more explanatory directions you could take. So it normally is a lot of copywriting as well. So you try to color code, and you try to tell a story in this time, important skills of job profiles, and still you can be really creative with your data visualization. So it can be really, really free, and it can be engaging as well, and studied, and you can get to the really details. But in a way, you are really prescriptive. At any point, you are framed really clearly. Okay, what's this visualization about, and how can I explore it? And with the same way, you can still say, okay, it's not really about the numbers I would like to see. I would like to tell a story about, in this case, like how deforestation in the Amazon takes place. So my visualizations are really more involved about giving a sense of urgency about how fast that goes. And these visualizations you can see here as well. So this is more abstract, still explanatory, but you get more an emotional response to it. So within each category, you get like this range of options to work with. When you step one side more to the left, so the previous examples are really about explaining it and guiding the user. This is really about having a real clear, not only a message to tell, perhaps also convince people in a particular way or change their hearts or change their minds about something. And this is a visualization which shows that. So it takes the data from drone attacks and it visualizes it over time. And it's really narrative. So you see which events took place in which years. But most of all, it immediately gives like a really eerie feeling by the way it's visualized. And also by the speed. And it's really, they use the way it's visualized, is really bombs falling from the visualization. So they take a really, this is not neutral anymore. Or, let's explore the data set. Now, this is really about giving us the urgency, like how that situation is, and conveying it in a data visualization. So, and even use the visualization itself to immediately convey that message. So this is about fishing nets are killing our ocean, and in this visualization already they cover the entire earth with fish nets, which is database, and they know where the fish nets are, but it immediately conveys the meaning of what they try to explore. And then next you can take action and you can look up all the ships that Sea Shepherd has to fight it. But it uses often a lot of strong imagery to create the setting, create the scenery, and really get you on an emotional level as well. And when we move back again a little bit on the exploratory, in first instance, you might think, okay, these are really, you manipulate, your interrogate is almost a research tool, or it's almost like, okay, this is the direction you go when you really want to know something. But also there you still have the option to go a little bit more abstract or a little bit more zoomed out and still a little bit more thinking about getting a overall sense of this data set, of what it's about. And the Google Arts experiments of this is a good example. So they did a study about all artworks in a specific collection, and they asked people like, okay, what's the emotion that you see when you look at this image? And then they categorize that, and they use this data set to visualize it. That's the first step into this data visualization. So first instance, it looks really abstract, and you're really like, okay, what's here? What am I looking at? There's no story to it. It shows me these texts, but once you interact with it, it becomes actually quite an interesting tool. So you can click on artwork, you can see which emotions were related to it, and you can explore the artworks that have similar emotions. You can zoom out, you can zoom in, you can see basically the different worlds that these artworks live in, but still from a really intuitive way to start with it. So it doesn't start with this categories on the left. You have filters, you can integrate this data. It's still really explorative. Then a little bit more, so when you involve the user even more, is have him participate in the data visualizations. You see that nowadays more Facebook, but also in this example, Strava cycling app that tries to engage you more with the data you have or with the data that you collected, and visualizing that in a way that's engaging. So it feels like you're contributing and you're almost part of the visualization itself. And these are like cool visualization, and together they tell a story or give a sense of how you performed. Often you can also have direct interaction. This is an example where was a project for Europe where people had to fill out specific categories, like for example where they lived, where their favorite food came from, where their favorite music was, etc. And then in the visualization, you could explore that as well. So people with roots, well, many people like Italian food, it seems, and many bands come from the UK. So there's no data involved, so it's still really abstract, and they travel everywhere. So this is a good example where you combine both. So you give the user an explicit role and driving gradually into the visualization. So these are again a really central role for the viewer, and a way where you can interact or where you can contribute something as well in this. So I think really interesting for archives as well, because everybody has perhaps even more memories about the things that live there, or how things relate to each other, or what the connections are. So I think the last example also shows that, like, you can use the visitor as well in your data visualization. And then another one we would like to highlight is the making it exhibitary. So make the visualization itself something really that stands out and lets you explore. So this is a really nice example when they had I think it was a fair about big data, but they also used big data in the big visuals surrounding these huge halls and visualizing it. So it's not always clear anymore what we're seeing here, but it's you feel it's real. It doesn't look fabricated. It doesn't need to say big data on the walls to convey a meaning here. And I think that's really powerful as well. So it's almost like a way to a style you could use to convey your meaning as well. So then is the question, like, when you have a basic understanding of these different patterns, I think it's nice to share with you how we use it in our office, because normally you come up with a mix of these visualizations when you work on projects. And I would like to show you 3 projects we worked on, which illustrate like different aspects of it as inspiration. And one is the Eurovision song context. They needed a central element to visualize each year what the theme is about, how what it is about. And because the Netherlands won, the Netherlands had to make that, and they put out a pitch to create a visual for the team, which was Open Up. And with that, we came up with a solution. How can you visualize opening up? Eurovision is about countries coming together, people participating. It's what we have in common. And we use that data that was available to visualize it in one mark. So in this case, it's about since the history. So of course, Eurovision has a history. It happens each year, and it also grows. So it started with a couple of countries, and nowadays we're with many. We even included Australia. So we're really opening up, and that's something that we try to visualize in one mark. And the mark itself might be really abstract, so people might know it from the start. But once you know that this is the data that came from it, it becomes really powerful, and you can use it in different ways that's meaningful. So when we explored it further, we could make similar visualizations of the different countries that participated during the Eurovision and create custom vignettes. So we could show for each year what the different countries, how they performed in the finals, and create identities out of that. So here we really took the approach to have a look at the data, see what we like to show, and mix that in a really strong visual language. And we also were open to change that when Eurovision was postponed for 1 year. And we also got the feeling that the message kind of changed. So it was quite, we talked about like that it's quite special that people come together and all the countries come together, and how many countries we have nowadays. But it became quite literally, it became quite special that we actually came together. And since the event was in Rotterdam, we used that geographical reference as a way to create a data visualization of that. So we mapped all the participating countries related to the Netherlands, so where they came from, and we mapped it in one symbol. And there we also played around, of course, with how can we visualize it in the best way, and what's the most aesthetic feel to that. So I take an example where when you have a clear goal in mind with your data visualization, what you would like to get, then it's easier to come to design as well. And also about the different layering, which we perhaps showed a little bit during the history. Like the data visualization might not be immediately understood or immediately visible, but once you know the story, you can contain a lot of information in one visual. So that's in this case as well. In a project for a large bank, and we had to visualize the impact of investment on the environment. We took a different approach than I think what people normally would think of when thinking about finances and numbers and impacts of your investment. You think about returns. I think the financial world is full with data visualization. And here, what we really focus on is how can we convey that message about what in this case the client was really focused about, is showing that by investing money, you have an impact on the world, and actually you have an impact on whether we reach the goals for climate and other sustainability goals. And what better way to do that is to zoom out again and use the world we live at, the Earth, as one visual. Try to see if we can create a visual from that. So next part was getting the data, but the central image, like, okay, we would like to zoom out and create a visual that really tells that story in one key visual. And that became the central element of this product, where you can, based on your investments, see what the impact was in different countries. And of course, because it was an investment tool, or you had to figure it out, that was not sufficient. So here we could not stop right there and say like, okay, this is how it's going. We still had to get to all the details about showing why a particular company was doing better or doing worse. And then we try to figure, can we make like a key visual that emphasizes that? So in the final product, we used a unique shape for each company, and show the impact of that particular company, and use that in the visual language, so you could see it throughout the platform. And again, this is really abstract, but it already conveys a message, like the shape and the size of the element. You can explore it in a way that still brings you to all the deeper layers in the information and the graph, how it behaves over time. But the entry kind of tells a story, like from the map where we totally zoom out what is happening towards gradually getting more to the details, to the more exploratory or more detailed, more study, really seeing the numbers. So not only seeing this rough shape, but also seeing the exact score. In the end is of course important, but we decided to leave that to the end of the journey. And you can also zoom out even further, like, okay, what's the audience and what do we need for the visualization to achieve? And this was a project we did for the Dutch Cycling Association with the BMX being introduced as an Olympic sport, but with the audience not really being familiar with the sport and perhaps having difficulties understanding like all these different tricks and all these. There was a total new world opening up for the audience, and they want to explore a way where we could use visualization to help the audience understand what BMX was about. And for that, we partnered with the KNWU, the local organization, and we experimented with fitting the bikes with sensors. And with those sensors, we could make visualizations, so even a broader audience, like grandpa sitting at the public, or the aunt also looking at the sport, like, probably many people who aren't familiar with BMX, to see what actually remarkable things these guys were doing on the track. And we visualized that to be shown on a really big screen during the event itself. So it was really accessible, and then we analyzed the data so we could highlight the different tricks that people were doing. So we kind of educated the audience together with entertaining them with these visuals. But by doing that, that was perfect for the general audience. We just wanted to get a better understanding of what the sport is about, or how what they are looking at. But of course, not sufficient when you're a jury member. You want to really assess how good a run was. So we did a total different visualization for them, way more complex, way more detailed, where you could see the entire run of a particular rider, and then also see all the tricks in detail, exactly how high somebody was riding, etc. So here you see how different audiences also require different solutions, different visualizations. So I hope that kind of showed how for each project, for each topic, for each data collection, you can think about the objectives, what would you like to have, what's the audience, and think really closely about what's the best way to bring that forward. And as overall insight, always have the goal clear in mind and try to explore. So that's from both sides. Like one side you have like the audience, which you might get a better understanding of. You might put in some extra research in who this audience exactly is, what their goals, needs are, and perhaps it's clear from the start, but often once you explore the data, you come up with more questions than you can answer. And the other angle is looking at the collection itself to see what's in the collection, what's in the data, and there you can have a discussion within your team. Okay, on what level do we want to process it, and what's the message we want to get across? Can we get to one number that's important and dive down from that, or do we want to visualize everything at once? So these are discussions where you sketch, question, do your research, and iterate on it. So once you have a key visual, such as we had like with the globe, we want to have a globe and we want to color it, then it's okay. But then what data do we need, and do we have the data? Can we get the data? So it's a challenge as well. And the other side around is also like, okay, we have this data, but when we have it, what's the big picture? What would be the headline? So it's this iteration that you take, and the arrow is really nice, and that's normally how we hope projects run and how they start and how we put it in proposals or try to structure it ourselves. But yeah, we are aware, and I think everybody is aware, especially with these kind of things. You cannot oversee it sometimes. So you start scanning documents, or you start scanning an encyclopedia, and suddenly see how incomplete it is or how complete it is. And that's where you should be able to alter and be free within your process, with partners, with people together, to try to figure out that picture. And once that goal is clear, then it's, yeah, like anything that's being developed, it feels logical, and it feels like it was easy, but normally it isn't. So with that, I would like to, thank you all for joining in this talk. We hope, and I think we feel confident that you can be inspired, and you have some examples or some directions that you could use in your own projects. And would be curious if you have any questions now, or otherwise later. We're really happy to talk to you.
Hello again, everyone. Yeah. Thank you for that lovely lecture. It wasn't just, I think, Clever Franke's work, but it was an amazing introduction, how you began with early examples of data visualization. So I think it was very helpful to kind of enter that narrative with what it meant before we kind of reimagined it in this century or these like past decades. So that was very, very helpful.
Yeah, it's really easy to get seduced by technologies and capabilities of what you can visualize. But it's quite fascinating that even with limited tools, you can be quite powerful in your visualizations. So
it's true. And I think, I mean, I have one question that I'd like to ask, because that kind of inspires me going back into history and looking at other types of information design. I just want to ask, because, you know, in machine learning or in any types of digital tools we use, we have this expression when we say the aesthetic of the medium. Obviously, it's a general expression, but I think it's the type of aesthetic that we now almost can recognize in some parts of work because of all the preset of tools that kind of, even though it's a big permutation of possibilities that these digital tools give us, they're still not infinite. And in a sense, the human can cluster them, you know, in a sense of like, oh yeah, this algorithm was used there and this came out of there, kind of a thing. And I think in your work and what you do, there's a really good combination of not being able to sense that somehow, because it's just kind of maybe taking that and then adding different layers of, as you said, making sense of that chaos in a sense. So I'd just like to ask you, how do you see the narratives of data or this like information design changing into the maybe next decade as it's getting more homogeneous in a sense? Do you see that people will go like to find maybe like more diverse ways of expressing themselves, or it is a danger that they should be aware of? So that's kind of the question that I have for you.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, whether you see like the aesthetics are influenced by the technologies that are used. I think what makes it a little bit different is that back in the days it was really easy to distinguish between the two. So you could really distinguish the tool, or it was comprehensible. We could understand like how certain data visualization was set up with machine learning and smart algorithms. The algorithms get a little bit more hidden, or it becomes unclear, even to the sense that it becomes magical. And things aren't magical. People are behind it, and it's not a machine. So I think there's a challenge there for us as a field, as a design field, to make those algorithms visible and magical in a way that you show how remarkable the technology is. But indeed what you see nowadays, like with recommended artworks or recommended IDs, or whether it feels like one ecosystem, but you don't see that system anymore. I think that's where part of the challenge for us, our field is.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for this lecture in general, and hope to see you again and hope to collaborate with you guys again. This has been a real adventure and has been very fulfilling for both our institutions, I think, SALT and Digilog. So see you again.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having us.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Take care.